We have sort of invented this idea of like the perfect person. Like a person who is always graceful and witty and talented and never makes mistakes. And even though that person doesn't and probably can't exist, we have inexplicably selected that as the baseline for how we all should be. Well, I reject that baseline because I think that some of the things we make fun of or hate about ourselves and other people aren't really that bad. The way that we dread awkwardness and the painstaking measures we take to avoid it, you think that awkwardness is like the worst thing ever. But here's the secret. Everyone is awkward. I mean, maybe there are some people that can gracefully face any social situation without that feeling. But if those people do exist, they make up the vast minority of human beings. I mean, some situations are just by nature awkward. We're not fucking up when we're being awkward. In many situations, awkwardness is the natural response. But of course, the more conscious we are of the fact that we're being awkward or that we're in an awkward situation, the more awkward and self-conscious we become. Like if you're having a conversation with someone and it looks like you've both run out of things to say and you're like racking your brain trying to think of something, and the more you think about it and the longer it goes, the more conscious you are that the pause is getting longer and longer, and it's like, ah. But like, if you can't think of anything to say, that's fine. Don't say anything. And the person you're talking to thinks you're weird because of that. Fuck them. But the thing about it is they probably don't think you're weird. They're probably not even thinking about you at all. Likely they're just as self-conscious as you for the same reason. Now note, I said being or feeling awkward is okay. I didn't say that making people uncomfortable is okay. I didn't say being creepy is okay. Those things are also awkward, but usually more so for the other person involved. And it's usually due to a violation of personal space or something like that, so don't do that. Now, another thing that people really seem to hate is being wrong. Even though, given that our limited experience provides us with limited information, it's likely that we're at least a little bit wrong about most things we believe. Now, I do think that over time as a society, we're getting better and better at being right about stuff, but we have far from mastered it, especially on an individual level. Like, I know we all understand that humans are imperfect. I don't have to tell you that. But just like right now, can you think of anything that you're probably wrong about? And it's kind of a weird question because if you thought you were wrong, you probably wouldn't believe it. But assuming that we're right about everything we believe, which most of us probably do, is technically irrational due to its sheer improbability. And there are some things that we may never know that we're wrong about, or we may never believe we're wrong about. And sometimes there are things that are demonstrably, provably wrong that we still believe. And one reason this happens is similar to the earlier bit about awkwardness. We're so stuck inside our own heads that we ignore the outside world. We often ignore evidence that contradicts our conviction. I think in part because being wrong is something we don't want to deal with. It's embarrassing, quite frankly. It's a sign of weakness. Only stupid people are wrong. But being wrong happens, and it's okay to admit it, and it's okay to face it. Now, being wrong can have very negative consequences. For example, children in the United States sometimes get preventable illnesses because people are wrong about vaccines. But even though being wrong can have negative consequences, it's still okay to admit that you're wrong. It's not immoral in and of itself to be wrong, which is fortunate because it's kind of impossible not to be most of the time. I watched a brilliant TED Talk by author Catherine Schultz who argues
our capacity to screw up, it's not some kind of, embarrassing defect in the human system, something we can eradicate or overcome. It's totally fundamental to who we are.
Now, it's cliche at this point to assert that people fear change, but usually when we say that we're referring to changes in the environment and things around us, and not necessarily changes within ourselves. But I think we're often afraid of that kind of change as well. Now, as we grow, we inevitably change. We're not the same person today that we always were, of course. But once we get to a certain point, we start developing convictions and identities. A lot of teenagers, for example, go through some kind of identity phase, whether it's like a goth phase or a nihilist phase or a troublemaker phase, and most of the time the person will deny that it is indeed a phase. This is just who I am, mom. And to be fair, sometimes it isn't a phase, just the early stages of who that person will eventually become. But usually it is. But the interesting thing to me is how adamantly they often deny that they will ever change, as if that would be such a horrible thing. And teenagers aren't the only ones who do this, and it can be something a lot simpler than your entire identity. For example, when I was younger, I loved the movie Fight Club. Club. Like, I seriously thought it was one of the best movies ever. And that was just part of who I was. I was a guy that, among other things, loved Fight Club. But then I watched it again as an adult after years of not having seen it, and I didn't find it as good as I remember finding it years before. And that made me really uncomfortable. Like, I'm the guy who likes Fight Club. How can this be? Have you ever had something like that? Like, you almost feel like a hypocrite, like you're not being true to yourself. But obviously, when you think about it rationally, there's nothing wrong with not liking Fight Club as much as you used to. And in fact, there's nothing wrong with changing in general. I don't know if you're starting to see the theme here, but changing, just like being awkward and being wrong, are inevitable things that happen and sometimes necessary things that happen. We should be open to those things. We should expect them to happen. We should assume they're going to happen because they are. And if we're ready for them, we can use them to improve ourselves and our interactions and even the world around us. That's just me though. I want to know what you think though. Drop a comment. I want to go ahead and give a shout out to all of the new subscribers. How you doing? If you like the video, please press the thumbs up button and subscribe if you like my hair. Fun fact, the only countries in the world that perform more executions than the United States are Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Iran, China, and probably North Korea. They're just way more secretive about it. Below that, the numbers start dropping off very drastically. So it seems that the death penalty is becoming more and more unfavorable across the world. But there are still some supporters, especially in good old America.